Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Um, this is going to kind of be like the download or the debrief of what I learned from going to Laguna Seca. Um, don't really have a structure for this, so it might be a little long-winded. And for those who are interested, I hope it helps you. And for those who kind of find it boring, I apologize. Um, by now you guys probably know that I was able to take the WRX to Laguna Seca, and it was an opportunity of a lifetime, right? As a guy growing up playing games like Gran Turismo, um, iRacing, Forza, Laguna Seca is sort of one of those iconic staple tracks that are available in almost every single video game, and I can't I can't stress how many hours I've spent lapping Laguna Seca inside of a video game. So to actually take a car that I've worked on to Laguna Seca and to take it around the track, it was just a surreal experience. And if you guys are ever given the opportunity to do that, I would strongly encourage you to take it. It's amazing. We got really lucky that day at Laguna Seca, so I was trying to go to Laguna during the summer months because up here in the Bay Area, some of the other tracks like Thunder Hill, they're really hot and the car doesn't like it. And turns out end of July was amazing. Normally Laguna, first couple sessions in the morning can be foggy or even a little dewy or damp. And we pulled out right at 9 o'clock and it was sunny and dry. So it was just I don't think the day could have been any better, and the car was amazing. Um, so one of the things that I learned while I was at Laguna was that the car or the track is ridiculously hard on brakes, and I didn't know that. I guess one because I didn't do enough research about the track, and two, in sim racing you don't get any brake fade, right? We can go around in Gran Turismo, we can go around in iRacing, and brake deep, overshoot braking points, and it just doesn't matter because those games don't simulate brake fade. And I was surprised because the rotors were starting to groove up, and G-lock pads are known for being really easy on rotors, not grooving them. And after the first session, there was some grooving. Second, third session went by, and the grooving got pretty. It was a decent amount of grooving. Then went home and researched it later, and Road and Track is quoted as saying that Laguna Seca is one of the hardest circuits on the West Coast for brakes. Didn't know that, and it kind of uncovered something that I thought was okay with the car. Right, the car already has big brake kit with large rotors and upgraded brake pads, upgraded fluids, and a brake duct or a brake deck setup, right? So I've done almost everything I could possibly do to ensure that brake fade doesn't happen, and it still did. Now, I have sneaking suspicion that some of it was fluid, but given the photo of the rotor where the J-hook is filled with some metallic whatever shavings or whatever, I think that the rotors were overheating. Now, I actually called AP Racing or Essex Parts out in North Carolina, I think, and they're like the sole distributor of AP Racing products in the USA. And I asked them about that, and they were saying that it's the brake pad friction material, which I kind of disagree with because the brake pad is designed to handle a very, very high temperature, and the guy was saying that the J-hooks are scrubbing off the pads, which is filling the J-hook with dust, and then as it heats up, it's turning into some type of metal shaving, and that's what I'm seeing. And don't think that's the case. I disagree, but I don't know. I'm not sure. I'll post a photo so you guys can be the judge of that. The other thing that I noticed about Laguna Seca, which kind of doesn't really come through in any of the sim racing I've done, is that it's very cambered. A lot of the turns are a lot more cambered than you would expect, and when you kind of go through it with the car, that camber gives you a little bit more grip, and you're a lot more confident in kind of attacking the corner. And although you kind of see it in the game, you don't really feel it, but once you're out there on track, you kind of, ooh, okay, there's a good amount of curve here that I can use to kind of facilitate the car getting through the corner. Um, the other thing was a corkscrew. I thought I would get like a sinking sensation in my stomach, kind of like when you go on a roller coaster as I went through the corkscrew. That was not the case at all. Didn't get any of that, which was cool. I was kind of worried about it. And then the other thing is that after you come through the left-hand section of the corkscrew into the right-hand section, I couldn't see out far enough to the curbing. And so although I thought I was pretty close to the curbing, in photos afterwards, you can tell that I'm missing the curbing by maybe a foot, foot and a half. And I'll post some photos of that here so you guys can kind of see what I'm talking about. I've seen photos of guys drive on the curbing. I've seen photos of guys drive on the green section past the curbing, which I've been told is a big, be careful with that because it can break the suspension on the car. I was playing it careful in the corkscrew section because on session 2, through the left-handed turn, I think I went on the green a little bit, and there's a lot of clunk that comes from the rear of the car. So that kind of scared me. I didn't want to ruin the rest of the day for myself, so I kind of took it easy there. But there's definitely a note for next time about how I can maximize the width of the track a little bit more. The other thing is there was so much going on in session 1 for me. So many things that I changed to the car, and learning a new track, and just kind of getting over the fact that, like, oh my god, I'm at Laguna Seca in my car driving it. So it was kind of like information overload. If you do watch any of the full session videos, which I've posted online, 1, 2, 3, and 4, you can kind of see session 1's really sloppy, 2 gets a lot better, 3's even better, and then 4 I'm just kind of going out and not pushing for a time, just having fun. So let's see. Some of the changes that I made to the car going to the track day was the Shift X3, which you guys have most likely seen videos of me making the brackets for it and wiring it up to the car. Right before I went, I loaded what the Autosport Lab community has named the Proformance script. It was kind of put together by a gentleman named Scott Barton. And the idea is that you can utilize the Shift X LEDs to tell you how close you are to the maximum longitudinal or lateral. Is it longitudinal? Yeah, and longitudinal and lateral acceleration of the car. So how many G's you can pull either in braking or cornering. And I thought that was a really cool tool to be able to visually see that and know if I can push harder in the corner. Never even looked at it. Not once. Too busy looking at where I'm going, cars in front of me, where I'm going to get off the brakes, where I need to get on the gas, where I need to point the car. Didn't even look at it at all. And the Shift X, in my opinion, is probably more optimally mounted than Shift X that I've seen from other users of the system. They have it much lower. So given that it's so close to the horizontal line of sight for me, and I couldn't even look at it, I think it's a testament when we see Le Mans drivers, GT3 drivers, Formula 1 drivers, just fiddling with the steering wheel and the amount of information that they have going on all around them, and still being able to drive at race pace, maybe even in the dark or in inclement weather. It's crazy, right? I'm in ideal conditions, and I can't even look at the Shift X to see what's going on. So that was cool. Okay, what else did I do? So I gave it a way more aggressive alignment. 3.7 degrees up front and 2.4 degrees out rear, 0 to all around. I think it may have been a little bit too much. In the photos that you see of the car going through the corners, the tires look pretty flat, which is ideal, right? That's why we're giving it camber to begin with. I'm looking at the wear patterns on the tires, which I'll show you later. It looks like there's a little bit of inside wear that was occurring, but also outside wear. It could be overinflated tires. I'm not 100% sure, given that I was kind of overwhelmed with what was going on that day. I brought the pyrometer, but I didn't use it. At that point, I was like, you know what, I'm going to stop the data collection. There's just too much going on. I'd rather just try to focus on the car and driving the track than collecting data today. So I collected no data whatsoever. And hindsight, I think that was the right decision because it really let me focus on driving and not optimizing the car. And I had a great time. I also made a rake change to the car. So if you're not familiar with rake, rake is kind of the pitch of the car as it sits statically. So, you know, how high the rears of the car compared to the front or vice versa. Previously, I think the car was pretty flat, maybe even having the rear slightly lower than the front, I think. And one of the things that I complained about immediately after doing that was that there was no rotation in the car during trail braking. So I would try to trail the car into the corner, and the rear just wouldn't want to rotate around. And at stock height, the car would do that, and it was super nice, very easy to control. You can really rotate the car into the corner and then just get back on the gas. After I installed the coilovers to the right height, that was gone. So when I realigned the car, I adjusted the rake to make sure that the rear was higher than the front. And this time we hit the track and the trail braking was back. Lightly on the brakes going into the corner, rear's coming around. Once I hit the apex, I could just slam on the gas, and the car would just pull itself out of the corner. And actually, in some of the corners, you can tell I initiate, I kind of get too crazy with the trailing, and the car gets loose on me. And in some instances, it gets loose on me during power oversteer or mid corner to exit, which is really cool to have happen in the Subaru, given that it's known to understeer and it's an all-wheel drive car. Let's see, what else? Hood louvers, subjectively, because I don't have data from Laguna Seca before I had hood louvers, I think they helped. But we'll save that for a later date when we go back to Thunder Hill, east and or west, because I have tons of data on the car without hood louvers at that track, so we can bring the hood with the louvers, hit the track, and see if there's any discernible improvement in coolant and oil temperatures, but I think that there was a little bit, a small amount. Shifting into turn 2, which I think is called the Andretti hairpin. Session 1 of the day, I was having a really tough time going from 4th gear, 3rd gear, and then especially into 3rd gear to 2nd gear. So 4 to 3 was fine. I've done that a lot of times at multiple different tracks. But I'm not used to having to downshift 2 gears. And 2 gears into a very tight corner where you're kind of, even though I've got the seat, you're kind of holding on. I was having a really tough time blipping it. So kind of want to show you some video of that real quick. Okay, so this is session 1, and the first kind of boo-boo on the downshift is going to be around 230. So we just passed corner 1, going hard into corner 2, downshift to the 3rd, great, downshift to the 2nd, and just kind of lock it up. Not lock it up, but it's a dirty downshift. It's not clean. And then again, same thing happening on the second lap, 3rd. Again, it's like a jerk, not good. Probably not terrible for the car, but ideally it should be cleaner. And then something really interesting happened in session 2 that I have never encountered on this car. And let me play the video for you and see if you guys kind of guess what's going on here. So right around 410. Damn, we did it again. Any chance you guys saw that? That one might not have been as clear. I think this one's much better. Getting faster going down the front, out of turn 2, turn 1 going to turn 2. Here we go. You guys see that one at all?
Oh my God, is that what's
Car's going
on?
into, for lack of a better phrase, Prius mode. And part of this is my fault because if you can tell in some of the videos when I go to hit the brakes, I'm hitting the brakes and the gas at the same time. I'm so hard on the brakes, and I think my foot positioning is kind of strange that I'm hard on the brakes and I'm also giving a little bit of throttle input, like maybe 10%, 15%, sometimes 20%. And it's a lot harder going into turn two because I'm also kind of bracing myself with the brake pedal as well. And you can see that I get deep past the first apex and I'm trying to blip the throttle. And you can see on the throttle input to the ECU that I'm hitting it, but my RPMs aren't coming up. So I call it the Prius mode because the car is simply not giving me the throttle input that I'm requesting, kind of like you would get in the Prius and the unintended acceleration. So because of that, instead of coming out of corner two in second gear, I started coming out of corner two in third gear. Now there's probably a little bit of time I could have gained from using second gear out of corner two, but because it's sort of just a brief little straight into a right-hand turn, I don't think that costed me too much. And again, I probably need to work on kind of like my heel-toe technique. I've seen it a little bit at Thunder Hill, but not as egregious as this. Like, this is terrible. Like, there are some corners that I go into and I get on the brake and you can see me holding the gas at like 20% open throttle, which is terrible. If you go look at some of my Thunder Hill videos, you kind of see it, but it's not anywhere near as bad. So I've got to work on that. That's my issue. I don't know if that's technique problem or just me bracing myself for a corner. That's something to research and figure out. Also took a hit in the corkscrew, but we already talked about that. The last thing would be compression on the coilovers. So again, a lot of things going on with the car, and at the end of the day, I added some additional compression into the car, and it was a little more fun to drive. I don't know if it really did much in terms of lap times, because my lap times in session 4 were slower than the rest of the day, but it was fun. I guess my point is that there's still a lot of tuning to be done with regards to just setting compression on the coilovers, and I've got a lot going on. It's probably a function of me just being kind of spread too thin, but it was fun, and you can see in the videos that the car does get a little squirrely, and I'm just having a good time. Alright, so the other thing I want to get into is the data, and right now we're inside of Track Addict, or I'm sorry, not Track Addict, Track Attack, which I think we've used the software before on the channel, and I've got all the data logs from session 1, 2, 3, and 4 loaded in, and I'm specifically looking at session 2 and 3 because those are where my fastest laps occurred. They are my last laps of both sessions, and I think this is strictly because on these last laps we just cooked the brakes so hard. We cooked them to the point where I didn't think that a subsequent lap would be any faster, and so we just did a cool down lap and then got off the track. Really, I think nailing the braking points on this track are what's going to produce faster lap times for the WRX. I don't think there was any hesitation about going the throttle here. Okay, so the first thing to note is that the difference between the fastest lap in session 2 and the fastest lap in session 3, they're only different by 0.02 of a second, so it's very little. And if I run my map across the data here, or run my mouse across the data here, in the bottom right hand corner there's a track map, and there's like a little line that's moving across the track to indicate where I am and which corner I'm coming up to. One should be purple and one should be yellow, and you can't even, I mean, you can't see the differences between the two laps. They're literally on top of one another. So we'll start from coming out of the front straight into turn 1. Speed is roughly the same. The braking points are slightly different, and I can see that the the purple lap, or the lap in session 3, for the most part is faster going through turn 1 and into turn 2. And I think I just was better on the brakes and a little bit more aggressive, and was better at waiting before I got on the brakes. Um, so I know that there's absolutely work to be done in corner 1. Um, I could probably stay on the gas longer. I could probably get on the brakes later. Um, but I was lacking a little bit of confidence because the brakes were kind of starting to fade. And I don't know, but maybe I could get on the brakes harder. Um, Coming out of corner 1, the car gets light, and then you get hard on the brakes, and the car gets squirrely. So, I mean, there's some confidence issues there, but there's a lot of runoff as well. So I guess there's a lot of room from error going into corner 2. Um, Coming out of corner 2, going into corner 3, the two laps are damn near identical. And to be honest, I think this is probably the strong. These next 2 corners are probably the strongest 2 corners for me. I feel very comfortable kind of trail braking these corners, letting the car rotate, and then getting back on the gas. Probably could have braked a little bit later, but for the first time at the track, I'm just kind of playing it safe. And as we continue down, if we're just looking at time differentials, if we continue down into corner 5, that's where the purple lap gains a rather large advantage over the yellow lap, or the lap from session 2. And I think it's because I carry a lot more speed into corner 5. And we can see here from speed, the speed differential, I over braked in session 2, and carried much more in session 3, about 5 to 7 miles per hour more. And you can see we braked roughly at the same position on the track, but in the purple lap, or the lap for session 3, I brake harder and then trail off and brake faster. The other issue that was kind of present throughout a majority of the corners is that I would get off the throttle and wait before getting on the brakes. And that's kind of like a big no-no. You want to get off the throttle and get straight back on the brakes. I think this was a side effect of me not knowing where to brake on the track, and so I'd come in under full throttle to where I roughly thought I would need to brake, and then get off the gas and wait and try to figure out where I would need to get back on the brakes or get to the brakes. And that happened in several of the corners. I think that's just me not knowing the track, and there's probably some time to be had just simply nailing my gas to brake transition points. Let's see. Okay, coming out of 5, going up the hill, the purple lap maintains a very large advantage all the way up Rahal Straight, and then it starts to disappear going into the corkscrew. So I get through the corkscrew, and I start to this yellow lap, or the lap for session 2, starts to pick up time against the purple lap. And I think it's coming out of the corkscrew under the bridge going down the hill, I carry more speed in the yellow lap. And it's not a lot more speed, but I'm staying on the throttle longer. I'm carrying a little bit more speed down the hill and through the apex. And I'm just not doing as good of a job in session 3 or in the purple lap. And I kind of give it all back. I give it all back and then some. Going to the last corner of the turn, I'm behind on the purple lap. So although these are very similar lap times, you can kind of tell that there are areas in the yellow lap where I'm stronger than the purple lap, and vice versa. But for me, the takeaway is I like the way I'm getting back on a throttle. Almost all the time. I'm going straight to full throttle. In some instances, yeah, there's a little bit of playing with the gas here, but it doesn't look terrible. And yeah, I need to work on it, but I think it's not egregious or like the worst thing in the world. The braking points, the brake application itself looks pretty good. For the most part, I get hard on the brakes and then I try to kind of trail it off, which was something I was really trying to work on that day. I think the biggest thing is where I get off the gas and where I get back on the throttle are going to be huge kind of time savers, or where I can net some time. So I think in all the corners I had mistakes. I think 3 and 4 were probably my best corners, or the corners I was most comfortable with. And I think areas of improvement are going to be corner 1, corner 5 breaking point, corner 6 breaking point. I think I can push the corner 7, I think, going into the corkscrew. Probably working on corner 9 and corner 10. And then again pushing corner 11, the breaking point on corner 11. So there's a lot of areas of improvement, I guess, is what I'm getting at. I think the car did pretty good, but it could probably do better. The other thing that was kind of interesting to me was that I wasn't pulling nearly as much or as high of a G in the corner as I've seen at like Thunder Hill. Usually I can pull 1-1, maybe peaking at 1-2, 1-3. Holy crap, this is high. 0.14. I don't think I've ever seen that. So I don't know if it's me or the tires, but I don't know what that means, right? I just know, man, this is really high. Where is this? 1-3? Holy crap. Maybe I take that all back. Looks like it's in some corners it does well, in some corners it doesn't, and I don't know if that's because of the camber of the car or the camber of the road. But it looks like the car has the capability to pull some pretty high Gs. Okay, so the last part of the video, I want to talk about the brakes, or I want to like kind of visually inspect the brakes. So let me get downstairs to the car, and we'll kind of go over the brake pads and the brake rotors and what I'm talking about when I say that Laguna Seca is hard on brakes. All right, guys, we're in the garage and we are looking at the tires that have come off the car. This is going to be front right, rear right, front left, and rear left. And I know these are the rears because they tend to pick up a bunch of the globs of rubber, and the fronts tend to be clean. We changed the alignment, as I mentioned before, for the car, and looking at kind of just the wear, which isn't like 100% the right way to do it, but I didn't take any data, so we're gonna have to go off what the tires look like. There might be a little bit too much camber on the front and on the rear, just looking at the wear bars here. So there's wear bars here. Here you can't kind of see these ones because they're covered in rubber. And then there's a set here. The inside of the tire seems to be more on the wear bar than the outside. So there's a little bit of a raised edge here. This would be the outside, this is the inboard, and this is the inboard, and that's the outboard. So there's a little bit of a raised edge here and here. This seems to be on the bar already. It's flat across the bar. This one still has a little bit of an edge. So for what it's worth, it seems to be that at least the fronts have a little bit too much negative camber. And if I look at the rear, it's similar. Now this one's covered in rubber, so I can't really tell. The seam's kind of flat, and this kind of has an edge, and I'm seeing the same on this side. So some of that could be because we just didn't play with tire pressure, right? We just set it and didn't even bother to look at it again. So the alignment's pretty close, maybe too much negative camber. Next time we're at the track, we'll definitely play with tire pressures here and see if we can optimize stuff before we make an alignment change. And there's definitely shoulder wear as well, right? So generally speaking, when you put a lot of negative camber, you want to even out the contact patch in the corners, and there's definitely wear on the shoulders here. Especially, I think, this front left. And Sega is definitely one of those courses where you do make right-handed turns, right, and pretty hard and cambered. Thinner Hill, it's not as hard on the left side of the car, but right around maybe a third of the way out, kind of the grooves that are cut into the tire, there's an area here where it's almost flat, and I kind of see it on all of them, and I don't think that was there before. But in any case, what I'm going to do is, again, I've been tracking tire depth for each tire and its position across the last 2 events. I'm going to take some measurements now and see what that looks like on the spreadsheet. Okay, so I've got all the data in the spreadsheet here. I will put it up on the screen somewhere so you guys can look at it. Unfortunately, the rear tires are kind of hard to figure out what's going on because of the extra rubber that's on the tire. It's hard to take accurate measurements, but from what I can tell, the rear right seems to have worn the least of all the tires and the least of the 2 rear tires. So this one took a little bit more, or the rear left took a little bit more of a beating. Initially, I thought the front left took more wear, but it turns out it was the front right, marginally. So I started out with less tread on this tire, it looks like. But the tires themselves are looking somewhere between 2 30-seconds and 3 30-seconds. So maybe good for 1 to 2 more events and they're done. They still seem to grip, which is great. I don't drive on these to the track. I don't drive on these on the street. I throw them in the car, take them with me, and then put them on when I get there to limit the number of heat cycles that the rubber sees. So hopefully we can get 2 more track days out of this, and we actually have new tires that should be delivered sometime next week. So it'd be fun to kind of try those out. I wanted to use these again just because we are collecting data on these tires, but turns out Federal stopped sending the FZ201s to the USA, and they haven't seen them for over a year and a half. And for the price, they were really good tires. I had 0 complaints about them. Held up to the heat and the weight of the car just fine. But unfortunately, don't get them anymore, so we've got a different set of tires coming. But we're going to try to spend these up in the next 2 track days here. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the brakes. Let me get the car up, and then we'll take a peek at the front pads and rotors. Okay, so I have the wheel off. I haven't taken the pad off yet. The first thing to note is there's definitely a lot more cracking in the rotor than there was before, and you can kind of see the grooving. I can definitely feel the grooving. These are the J-hooks that are there to kind of release gases as well as clean the pad surface, kind of give you like a fresh layer of friction material. If you notice on these outside grooves, these outside J-hooks at the very edges are filled with some type of material. And it's not that hard, but it's definitely like polished over. I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's brake pad material or rotor material. I thought it was rotor material, but given how relatively easy it is to get out, it might be pad material heating up. And if that's the case, maybe there's a chance here that I overheated the pads. So let's go ahead and pull the pads off, and let's take a look at the surface of it and see what's going on here. The pads are off the car here, and kind of got like an assortment of pads here to show you what I'm talking about. This is a set of pads that came off the car, driver's side. this is the inboard side, and this is the outboard side. You can see right away there's definitely some kind of grooving that's happening. There's a groove pattern on the pad, and you can feel it. The other thing I noticed is that they've got a little bit of a gloss to them, and looks like they glazed a little bit, and you can kind of feel it in the car. There's really no bite anymore. You have to just bury your foot into the pedal to get the car to stop. There's a little bit of a glaze. For reference, this is a brand new pad. This is actually this exact pad. I've got a second set here. It's never been installed. This is what it should look like. And then for reference, these are the XP8s that I had previously used that have like a really nasty glaze to it, and these were really overheated at the track. So definitely the verdict here is that we were overheating the pads a little bit. The other thing that was kind of interesting to note is the wear. So again, for whatever reason, this particular caliper or this setup or my setup likes to wear the outside radius of the pad more than the inside radius. So this would be the outside of the disc, and this would be the inside of the disc. And if we measure them, you know, the outside radius is, what is it, 16.2, and the inside is 17.4. And then on this one, it's 15.1 and 15.7, right? So the inside tends to wear slower than the outside in terms of the radius, and then obviously this is, and again, this is the outboard pad, this is the inboard pad, so my inboard pad seems to be wearing faster than my outboard pad. So we're gonna have to flip pads accordingly, and let's say on average, these two pads averagely are at 16 millimeters in depth. For reference, a brand new pad, look how thick that is. Brand new pad is about 20.6. So we wore almost 5 millimeters of pad off in one track day, not even doing all 5 sessions. And I would say session 1 is probably not as hard as session 2, 3, or 4, just because I was learning the track. The other thing to note is the backing plate on the pad is about 5 millimeters thick. So that means in reality, I have about 11 millimeters of pad left, and that would put me somewhere around 2 track days at Laguna Seca. Thunder Hill, I think, wears a little bit less, but so if I were to take these pads out to Seca again, I'd get 2 track days out of them. And it's about a $280 set of pads for just the front axle. So that is very expensive. Just that one track day costed me about $90 in brake pads on the front of the car, give or take. I don't know what to do about the glazing. It's just a little bit of a glaze, and I know that you can send them back and they can shave it down. I think the bite's gone out of the pad though. But I don't know if I should switch to a higher compound pad for Seca next time or not. And yeah, gotta maybe talk to G-Lock about that and see what they say. So that's it for the brakes. I am going to bleed them because I think there was a little bit of fluid fade there, so might as well take care of that now since I'm going to be taking all the tires off and swapping back to my street pads. Alright guys, so I think that's just about it for this video. You know, Laguna Seca was a hell of an experience and definitely learned a lot about the car and kind of discovered some things that I need to continue to work on. So I'm going to go ahead and try to, especially the brakes, go ahead and try to figure out what I can do about that. If you guys have any comments or suggestions about the kind of the structure of the video or anything we talked about, please you know, mention it in the comment section below. I'd appreciate it. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you at the next one. Take care. Bye.